Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women's Table. I created this table because I think as women, we spend a lot of time of talking and conversing among each other. But how many times do we actually have the conversations that make us stop and ask ourselves the hard questions? That's what we're going to be doing here. I'm going to ask questions, the questions that I had to ask myself too, and I'm going to share my answers with you, my experiences, things that I had to sit with and be honest with myself about. But I also want you to answer too. So as we go along, I'm gonna ask a question. So when I ask a question, don't just listen to my answer and move on. Actually ask yourself the question. Because sometimes the first answer we give ourselves isn't the real answer. Sometimes you have to ask another question and then another one until you finally get to the truth. That's what I do with myself. So that's what we're gonna do at this table. So girl, come sit down and let's talk. And I'm sure you're wondering by now, okay, where is the table? Girl, guess what? As women, you know, we bring the table and we build the table and we put everything that's on the table. So get with it. All right, so let's get into it. For anyone that's joining right now, welcome, and I appreciate each and every one of you for taking your time to be here, to listen, and to actually partake in what we're doing. If you see me looking down, it's because I'm looking at my phone, because I have my notes here. I'm trying not to ramble off too much or do too much yapping, but stay on track, okay? So just so you know. Okay, so the first question I'm gonna ask is, when was the last time you felt like yourself? Not as a mother, a wife, an employee, a girlfriend, or just a friend on a whole. When was the last time you felt like yourself? Okay, so really think about it. It's not when was the last time you felt like a mother, like the duties you do as a mother or the things you do when you're in a relationship. But when was the last time you felt like yourself? Okay, outside of your job, outside of being a friend, all these things. When was the last time you felt like yourself genuinely? Okay, take some time to actually think about that, and then we're gonna answer it together. All right? Okay. I think it was like probably in a couple months ago, probably 3 months ago, I actually asked myself this question. And it may seem like a simple question, but when I really thought about it, it was a hard question because I am a mother. I was in a relationship and I was like, okay, I am a mother, I'm a girlfriend, but I'm like, who am I outside of those things? Who am I outside of work? You know? And lo and behold, I could not answer that question to save my life. Okay, it took me probably weeks to actually get to the bottom of it. And I realized that I surround my life around my kids and my partner. And when I'm not around my kids or I'm not doing something that involves with my kids, or I'm not at work, or I'm not spending time with my partner, I wasn't really doing anything else for myself, you know? So I felt like my identity was lost in being a mother and being a partner. And don't get me wrong, nothing's wrong with that. But I also realized that I had to make time for Carol outside of being a mother and outside of being a partner and outside of an employee, you know? And it made me start thinking. And I made an oath to myself. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna start being intentional about my life, okay? And I'm gonna start doing things for me, whether that's going to the coffee shop and getting a matcha, what is going out to the movies by myself, or what is going out to spend time with my friends, what is going running or doing stuff that I generally want to do, but for myself, make time for myself. So I was intentional and I started to take myself out on solo dates and stuff like that. It was intentional. This was me time and me focusing on myself, and so that I can start building my own identity outside of being a mother and outside of being a girlfriend. Okay, so maybe the question isn't how do I get back to the old me. Maybe you need to ask yourself, who am I now? Okay, and like I told you earlier, that's something I had to ask myself. Who am I now in this moment? Because I had to ask myself, this question. It was, did I lose myself? Did I lose myself in being there for everyone else except myself? Okay, so the next question is, what am I carrying right now that nobody at this table would know that I'm carrying right now? Just by looking at you. I mean, look at me. Can you tell what I'm carrying right now with just looking at me? Be honest. Probably not. And I think that's the same for a lot of us. You can't just look at somebody and figure out what they're going through. So the question is, what are you carrying right now that just by looking at you, nobody can tell what it is that you're carrying, you know? And for me, even right now, there was a lot of times in my life and different seasons where I was carrying so much, but I'm this type of person, I always have on a poker face. So you can never tell what it is that I'm carrying. I could be dying inside, but I'm still operating. I'm still smiling. I'm still doing what I need to do. I'm still functioning as a mom, as a partner, whatever it may be. I was still functioning. Even to right now, I'm going through a season where I'm between careers and I'm trying to figure out, okay, what it is that I need to do right now, but I'm doing it all on my own, you know, because it's my journey and I have to figure it out on my own. But at the same time, I'm still functioning every day like there's nothing. But trust me, I'm stressed out inside. So a lot of women are, and a lot of strong women, these are for the strong women, right? A lot of strong women are walking around like they have everything together, and you will never guess that they're going through so much, because by looking at them from the outside, they look put together. They look like they're living their best life, but they may be suffering inside. And I'm sure you've heard this saying, you know, check up on the strong ones, because the strong ones is the ones that be going through the most. And let me tell you, that is true. So don't be quick to judge. Just because you see someone that has it all together, that means they have it all together, because you never know what somebody's going through underneath that layer of or underneath that smile, underneath that cheerful personality, under that have it together. Okay? And I had to ask myself, why am I so good at looking like I have it all together when I'm not okay? And here's a question I want you to really think about. Are you carrying it because you have to? Or have you carried it alone for so long that you don't know how to put it down? And that's the thing. That's actually what I had to think about. You know? So that's also something for you to think about if you're like that. Okay, so the next question is, how do you know you've outgrown a life that you've prayed for? How do you know? Guys, this one was a battle for me, you know, because how do you admit that something you prayed for doesn't fit anymore? How do you explain that? And I think it's one of those feelings you get like you're between a rock and a hard place, because you prayed for this thing, you received it, you've had it for years, but now you're in a different season where you've outgrown that same thing that you prayed for, you know. But I think part of it is knowing that it served its time and it served its purpose, and nothing is everlasting, you know what I mean? And I think sometimes when we pray for things and we get it, and we're grateful for it, don't get me wrong, we're grateful for it, but also as humans, we grow, we age every year, you know, we grow, we develop. And with that, sometimes the same thing that you prayed for is the same thing that you're now outgrowing. So how do you do that? You can be grateful for one thing, but also outgrowing it at the same time. Okay, and nothing is wrong with that, because you're allowed to expand, you're allowed to grow as a person. If you stay the same place, there is no growth. Okay, and that's something that I think I battled with when it came to one of my business. It's something that I was doing a long time, And it was something that took me through a lot of hard season. This is something that I generally prayed to God for, to give it to me, and I got it, and it held me up for so many years. But like I said, it reached a point where I was like, okay, this doesn't fit my life anymore. I've outgrown it. It's not in alignment with me. And I was heartbroken because I was like, it was my baby, it was my first business, and I've outgrown it. But I also prayed about it, and I got relief, and that's what helped me. And next thing that you should ask yourself, what if you're not supposed to spend the rest of your life holding on to something just because you once asked for it? So tell me, are you afraid to admit that you've outgrown it? I know that was a good one. Hey guys, stay with me. I know this is question 3, and it's already hard. It makes you dive deep, like really deep, to get the answers you're looking for, right? Okay. And I hope you ladies are writing these questions down. For those of you who can answer it right now, who have to think about it, just write it down in a book, and then later you can go back and look at it and answer the question, and answer them honestly. All right, so we're at question number 4, and that is, what do you keep telling yourself you need more time to decide? What is it? What is it that you keep telling yourself you need more time to decide? That thing that you keep thinking about, that you keep saying, okay, I'm gonna decide on it later, or you just need a little bit more time, you're not sure, you keep overthinking it. Yeah, that's what it is. So what is it? For me, it was my relationship. Okay. And I think we've all been there once in our life, or maybe more than once, because I've been there more than once, if I'm being honest. I've been in relationships where I've stayed longer than I should have. Okay. And I feel as women, we leave relationships or a situation mentally before we leave emotionally, or before we remove ourselves physically, let's just say that. And it was a decision that I took months, probably 4 or 5 months, to think about before I actually made the initial step to end it. It wasn't easy. It was what was best for me in that time. I thought about it, and I was like, and I think for my situation, because it wasn't somebody that was a bad person, they wasn't treating me bad, they, like I said, there was a great boyfriend, a wonderful boyfriend. But sometimes, not because two people are you can have two good people, they come together in a relationship and they're great, but our values wasn't matching up. We both wanted different things in our life, futuristic, on both sides. So on that part, we weren't matching, and it was a situation where do we just stay comfortable because we're comfortable with each other, because we get along so good with each other, or is a situation where we should just call it quits? And I really had to make that hard decision. And I think it was hard because he was like, you're so comfortable, this is such a great guy, we're good together. But sometimes good together doesn't mean compatible, ladies. I made a decision to leave, and I don't regret it, because I can see now why it needed to happen. So I had to be real with myself. Like, did I need more time to think about it? Or did I already know and I just didn't like the answer that it required from me? So let me ask you, if nothing in the situation changed in the next 6 months, what would your answer be? Because maybe that's your answer now. Okay guys, we're halfway through, and what do you guys think? Are you guys feeling alive? Are you guys with me? Are you feeling the questions? Are you thinking about it? Can you relate to it? Let me know how you guys are feeling, and let's go on to the next question. What are you afraid will happen if you finally choose yourself? A real deep, guys. We always say choose yourself, right? Sounds good. But nobody really talks about what choosing yourself can really cost. It's hard. You know, can you imagine that it's hard for you to choose yourself over somebody else when all your life you've been choosing other people before yourself, or you've been putting them before yourself, and just for one day you decide, I am no longer putting anybody in front of me, and you're scared to do that. Why is that? Why are we scared to choose ourselves? Why is it? I had experienced that with a family member. You know, this is someone I grew up with, this is someone I love genuinely, but there come a point in my life where I felt like I was always giving. I was always pouring out. You know, I was always there when they needed me and everything. I'm not saying that they weren't there for me when I needed them. There was. But it came to a point where I was like, I'm the one that keeps pouring and pouring and pouring. And I realized that every time I poured, my cup was empty. You know, I wasn't getting poured back into the way I want, if you follow me. You know, and it was a really hard decision because, like I said, this person was really close to me, and for once in our life I chose to put me first, and it hurts. And I don't think this is something people talk about a lot. People talk a lot about getting hurt or heartbroken in a relationship, but it hurts when you have to choose yourself or cut a family member off or cut a friend off because you're choosing you. You know, so I had to ask myself, what was I really scared of losing? And then the harder question was, if I keep choosing this person over me, what am I gonna lose in myself? So yes, ask yourself, what might happen if you choose you? But also ask, what is already happening to you because you keep refusing to choose? And if you realize what I just said a few seconds ago, because I keep choosing this person, I was draining myself, you know? Hey guys, so we're on to the next question. I know that one, that question was like really deep, guys. This question I actually had to ask myself a couple days ago, so this one is fresh. Why don't you trust yourself to build a life outside of what's familiar? Why don't I trust myself to build a life outside of everything I know? You know, if it's one thing I know is that I can sacrifice, I can put in a work, I can put in overtime. Listen, if it's one thing I know is that I'm a woman that can work. Okay, but this time it was different. This time it was more personal. Accustomed to doing a certain type of job, and I was accustomed to functioning a certain type of way. This season of my life, I had to learn how to work in a different way, and it was hard because I was accustomed for so many years to work one specific way. Okay, and when you're accustomed to work in one way, you're set in your ways already, you know. So it was really hard for me to transition, you know. And I had to ask myself, but why is it that I'm struggling so much? It's like I was fighting with myself, you know. But here's the thing, what I realized was, I do trust a woman who made a decision, but trusting myself also meant accepting the responsibility that came after the decision that I made. You know what I mean? Nobody is going to save me. So I had to ask myself, Carol, what are you going to do now? What are you going to do now? Do you really not trust yourself? Or was I afraid of, I don't know, just how much trusting myself is going to require from me? You know, like how much? And maybe you need to ask yourself the same thing. Do you really not trust yourself? Or are you afraid of finding out just how much trust in yourself is going to require from you? Right, guys, we're getting a little hotter and a little bit deeper here, because this question is going to blow a lot of you. Can you love someone and still know they're not meant to go where you're going? But whether we still love the person, but what if you do? You know what? Leaving a person doesn't mean that you don't love them, because you can't like block off your feelings like that, you know? I guess a lot of people, they know the reason why they left the person, but they happen to meet up with them or happen to see them and they get all these feelings. They're like, why did I break up with them? But they're not really asking why they break up with them. They just get this rush of nostalgia, you know, and they were like, things were so good, but they're forgetting that things were also bad. You know what I mean? And you get caught up in that feeling, you end up going back to that person. But when you end up going back to that person, maybe a couple months after, you realize, okay, there was a reason why I left this person. But guess what? You're already caught up with them, you know, and it may take you maybe a couple years or a couple months later, and you realize, yeah, it's not gonna work out, and you end up breaking up with them, you know. That's what it's saying, you know. And I have to ask myself, I love them, but does that mean that if I love them, does that automatically mean they're right for the life I'm building? And the answer wasn't easy. So here's what I want to ask you. Are you holding on because this person is aligned with who you're becoming? Or are you holding on because you don't know how to grieve someone that's still alive? Okay, ladies, how are we feeling? How are we feeling? We're down to the last two questions before we wrap it up. And I hope you ladies are enjoying this woman's table session. I really do, because I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying talking to you guys, like, you know, having these conversations and being real with each other. I love it, and I hope you guys are enjoying it and love it too. So let's get back into it. All right, so the next question is, what happens when the plan you sure would work doesn't work? Girl, that's one thing. I have planned things, executed, stayed disciplined, executed. Listen, being consistent, staying disciplined, showing up, and still looked around like, okay, so why isn't this working? Exactly, why isn't it working? I'm putting in the work every day, showing up, being consistent, doing everything I need to do. The plan was bulletproof. But let me tell you something, right? Let me tell you something that I've learned over this past year, this past 2 years. You know that saying when they say you make plans and God laugh? Well, he does, because guess what? He has the last say. You know what I mean? And what I realized is sometimes you make the plan and you execute the plan, you stay consistent, you keep showing up, you're disciplined, okay? You have planned out everything to the T. But guess what? Things doesn't work out the way you want it to. But you know what I realized? Let me come a little close to say this. You know what I've realized is sometimes things doesn't work out the way you want it to. But if you take a closer look, you realize that the thing that hasn't worked out was actually working on you. You know, it was actually training you. It was actually building you, building your character. You know what I mean? So you were shining up yourself. You were becoming better. You know? And guess what? Maybe something in that plan wasn't bulletproof as you thought it was, the way you think it was bulletproof. And that's something I had to generally open my eyes up to seeing. Because listen, like I said, you can have a plan and everything, But at the end of the day, God has the last say. And if God sees that, okay, you have the plan, but something is missing, maybe your character isn't built for where you're trying to go, or you're not ready to handle what it is that you're supposed to receive, he's gonna hold back. He's gonna hold you back a little bit and continue working on you, continue training you, continue building your character, your stigma. And then when he thinks, okay, you know what, holding her back, I see that she's molding into the woman she's supposed to be, then things are blown. So sometimes the disappointment is a blessing, but it's working on you. So ask yourself, are you committed to what you said you wanted, or were you only committed to the version of the plan that felt safe and made sense to you? You see where I'm going with this? The plan didn't work out the way you wanted it to. But the thing is, are you still going to keep going? Or are you going to look deeper and see what was actually happening behind the scenes and choose to keep going? Think about it. Okay guys, we're at the last question. And ladies, thank you for being with me for so long along this route. And let's get into the last question before we wrap it up. After everything we talked about, I don't want to ask you about what we learned. I want to ask you something much simpler. One thing you need to do when you leave this table. You know, I think for me, for me, the one thing I know I would do is continue walking the path that I'm walking and the career that I'm building right now, because it's, like I said, nothing like anything that I've ever done, but it also fulfills me and it also brings me joy with doing it every day. You know what I mean? So that's the one thing that I will continue to do. Okay, because after all the questions you asked yourself today, maybe you don't need more information, maybe you don't need another video, maybe you don't need another person to tell you what to do. So let me ask you one last time, what is the one thing you're gonna do after this video? When are you gonna stop asking yourself questions you already have the answers to? Okay ladies, thank you so much for being a part of the Women's Table, and I'm so excited. This is the first Women's Table, and it will be the first of many. And like I said, this table is for women to come together as one and to talk, to be heard, to be seen, to put down what it is that feels heavy, and just give yourself time to be honest with yourself and to be open and honest with yourself. Okay, before I close out this video, I also want to say something. Ladies, a lot of the time we make plans, or we have things that we may want to do, and we keep putting it off, and we say, oh no, I'm going to do it tomorrow, or I'm going to do it next week, or I'm going to do it later. But tomorrow never comes, next week never comes, or later ever comes, you know. And part of the reason I'm doing this is because I want women to stop putting off things. I want you to start putting yourself first and start thinking about yourself, because you deserve to have a beautiful life, a fulfilled life, a loving life, that you wake up and every day you feel grateful for the life you have, because you are living it the way you want to live it. Ladies, I hope this video brought you joy and helped you as much as it helped me, and I'm looking forward to having the next Women's Table, which will be next month. So guys, stay tuned, look out, and God bless.
Am I really that much to handle? Breaking these niggas down like a camel. You don't really know you.